Simple Aesthetics radio show, where for the next hour, we will seek to demystify the world of aesthetics and provide to you, our listening audience, a non-medical opinion on what's hot, what's not, and what works based on our experience of performing over 22,000 treatments since 2005. The views provided on this show should not be considered medical advice, but rather the opinion of the host who has been in the medical aesthetics business since 2005. During this program, we will highlight some of the best new and tried and proven FDA-approved services and go over the technology, how and why it works, results you can expect, and take your questions live on the air. If you have a question you'd rather email, please send it to brian@foreveryoungmedspa.us. And now, here's your host, Brian Sedella.
Good afternoon, South Florida. Welcome back to Forever Young Med Spa. Pardon my speech impediment. Presents Simple Aesthetics. We have a busy show lined up for you today. But before we get into the show, lots to talk about LeBron James. It's been the talk of talk radio sports stations all morning long. What's he going to do? I have no idea. But I wanted to add just a quick commentary from someone who loves the game of basketball and has followed it his whole life. When I was younger, I was always been a lifelong Celtic fan and followed the career of Larry Bird and Havlicek before him, and loved the Celtics. So obviously, I hated the Lakers. And if you remember back then, the Lakers had Magic Johnson, and Bird and Johnson were thought of as the two best players in the world. And when the Lakers beat the Celtics, I hated Johnson even more. But over time, this is going back into the late 80s, or late 70s, 80s, I bought a satellite dish to watch every Celtic home game. That's how much of a crazy nut I was. And through the playoffs with the Celtics and the Lakers, I grew to love Magic Johnson, which was like a sacrilege if you're a Boston fan. But I actually would watch every Celtic game and every Laker game because the best player in the world is not the best player on the court. It's the player who makes everyone around them better. And both Bird and Johnson had those qualities, and so does LeBron James. LeBron James makes everyone better, and if he goes to Cleveland, I, for one, will be a Cleveland fan because I enjoy watching the best player on the planet play. And look, he's deserved it. He's won his 2 championships, and whatever he decides is good by me. Not that I matter, but just wanted to get that off my chest. So, this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, we didn't finish last week's show. I think we got as far as, we got as far as the gross cell phone thing, and then we talked about procedures that Allure magazine said were not very popular, shouldn't be looked at. And the last one we didn't get to was on foot lifts. Yes, there's such thing as a foot lift. And according to the article, they don't think they're for everybody, and in fact, they're not. I mean, you can imagine getting a little liposuction for your toe. Believe it or not, that actually happens. One application that has had some notoriety and some good results is using Sculptra or other fillers into the balls of the feet for models. You know, models stand on their feet all day long and they lose their foot pad. It begins to thin over time. So using Sculptra or Radiesse or Perlane or another filler in the ball of the foot sometimes, allows more cushioning and more comfort for the person wearing the high heels, not me. Okay, well, hopefully, Dr. LaGrasso is going to be calling in any moment to go over a procedure that is probably the most popular procedure in all South Florida, and that is the Brazilian butt lift. And I'll let him answer the questions about what that is and how it works and so on and so forth. So before we get to Dr. LaGrasso, we have some studies, as usual. Every week I get all the latest news sent to me. And the first one I'm going to put up, and Freddie, if you could cue this up, is how to spot skin cancer. And it goes over the ABCDEs of melanoma. And in the study, it highlights a couple interesting statistics. And look, my goal is to educate you, the listening audience, on everything related to the practice of medical aesthetics. In this case, it includes some common sense information on skin cancers. 1 in 5 Americans will be diagnosed with skin cancer in their lifetime. And contrary to popular belief, anyone, regardless of their type of skin, And again, if you remember from prior shows, skin types go from 1 to 6, from light Caucasian to dark African American skin. Anyone in that range can get skin cancer. There's a fallacy out there that if you're a black person or a person of very dark, who's dark-skinned, you can't get cancer, and that is not true. You do have more natural protection than lighter-skinned people, but believe me, anyone can get cancer. And on our website, if you go to www.foreveryoungmedspa.us, you will see a blog section at the top of the screen. If you click on the blog section, if you're not seeing this live now, you can see it then, and you can read the article for yourself. Going to come down now to, and Freddie, if you can get this one up on board, that'd be great. Actually, I think Dr. LaGrasso is calling in, so we'll come back to this. So let's see if Dr. LaGrasso has joined us. Dr. LaGrasso, are you there?
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Outstanding. How are you?
Excellent.
Okay, hopefully you got a few minutes in between the surgeries this afternoon, and we're going to be discussing, discussing Brazilian butt lift, which is, I don't think you can drive down South Florida without seeing some type of advertisement for a Brazilian butt lift. So why is this so popular a procedure in South Florida? Do you have any indication as to why it is?
Not only in South Florida, but all over the country. They have, defined the buttock region as the new breast. And I think that we've gone away from the extremely thin, wasted, curved body to what's become popularized nowadays in the, a little bit of more plump, firmer, curvaceous body. Definitely driven, from a little bit of a Latino influence, but it's gone through all of the different, racial types, from the Caucasians, the African Americans, Latinos, even some of the Asian people. More advancement of cyclical goals. The same way in 10 years, the fashion world drives things here and there, but, as of now and in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen a dramatic rise in the requests for people who want, more curvaceous, shapelier backside and abdomen and body, as opposed to just being completely straight and thin.
So kind of what's old is new again. Back in the 50s, Marilyn Monroe was a very curvaceous actress, and then we kind of graduated to the South Beach, waif-thin models. Looks like we're back in vogue now with more of a curvaceous figure, as you said. So what is a Brazilian butt lift, and how does it work?
A Brazilian butt lift, combines two different procedures in one. What we're actually doing is taking fat from one area.
Kind of breaking up a little bit, Dr. LaGrasso. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you're back.
What we're doing is we're taking fat from one area of the body and transplanting it into the buttocks to create a desired shape and form. So it's a combination of two procedures. The first part of the operation involves the harvesting of the fat, which involves the use of liposuction. What we're doing is we're using a cannula to remove the fat. But when we're removing that fat, we're removing that fat to create a desired shape. You have to think of it like, Michelangelo sculpting the David. You're taking a piece of marble and you're chiseling away at certain areas to kind of create a certain form and shape, which is ideal, to that person. Everyone's ideals are different. At the same time, we're harvesting that fat under a low pressure with larger diameter cannulas, the viability with the fat, and we're taking that fat and we're transferring it into the buttock region. A lot of that fat is transferred into the gluteus maximus muscle, which has a lot of blood supply, so that has the highest percentage chance of the fat surviving, and then the rest of it is transferred into the subcutaneous tissue to kind of create more of that, shape that you want. A lot of times we'll even transfer fat into that lateral buttock, or thigh region to create an even more sweep that, some cultural types may move sort of in that area, which is very common, called the trochanteric depression. In the end, what we're trying to create in the female, no matter which way you look at a female, from the back or from the side, we're trying to accentuate that S curve.
Okay, yeah. Is it actually, though, a lift? So you're not actually lifting the buttocks. You're giving the illusion of a lift through the transplantation of fat in strategic areas in the buttocks.
Well, it is lifting it per se, adding volume for fat access, structural support. So adding structural support to the area will lift a butt that's sagging a little bit. Obviously, if there's a lot of ptosis or sagging of the glute area, you may need to do more of a surgical operation by making an incision in the top part of the buttocks and lifting it up that way. Typically more common in people who've lost a significant amount of weight, after gastric bypass or lap band surgery, or people who just lost exercise through diet and exercise. A little bit of ptosis, from just aging and gravity can be addressed by injecting fat into that area. Now, you're also a little bit of some volume and size, but that does help to add structural support to push things up.
Yeah, the pictures on the screen is the first picture is of patient number 1, and just simply an incredible, outstanding result. What can you tell us about this patient? And she's the one with the tattoo, Dr. Lagrasso.
Yeah, this is a younger patient, and, people are just looking for that better curve. They want that curve in the lower back. They want more of that hourglass shape, and to define it even more and to accentuate it, by adding volume into the buttock, it just creates a shape that people want. Like I said, people want to look good in a bathing suit, and, thin is in, but thin and curvy is definitely not thin and straight.
Well, if I'm a patient coming in and I have kind of a tummy pooch, and I'd also like a Brazilian butt lift, can you combine these procedures, or you have to do one then the other?
Typically, I do not combine Brazilian butt lifts with any sort of tummy tuck or abdominoplasty procedure. One of the key things is that when you're taking fat from one area of the body and transferring it somewhere else, you literally are doing a transplant on that patient. So it's similar, in recovery to a kidney transplant or a liver transplant, and the fact that, you have to take care of it. Obviously, it's an exact identical match, so you do not need to be put on any of the immunosuppressive drugs that you do with a transplant from, taken from another person, but still need the blood supply to survive, and, typically you're not going to keep everything that survives. The range that most people are going to keep is somewhere between 50 and 70%, and it varies on a lot of factors. Obviously, young people keep more fat because their fat is younger. People who are older, 40s, 50s, 60s, aren't going to keep as much fat because your fat ages like you do, and it doesn't have the capacity to survive that big of a shock. But, in the recovery process, one of the main things is that you have to sleep on your stomach for the first month, and you cannot sit for the first 10 days. You don't want to apply pressure to the buttocks so that you're compressing the fat and decreasing the amount of blood supply and oxygenation that goes in there. So theoretically, when you're doing a tummy tuck abdominoplasty, which involves making an incision in the lower abdomen, tightening up the stomach muscles, and tightening and removing any of the loose skin that's on the abdomen, you need to lay on your back, specifically in a flex position in the recovery period, to take tension off the incisions so it heals well. So logistically, you can't do the same thing a couple times because I don't know how you would sleep. You have to be strung up like a puppet.
Well, what about if you had Vaser body contouring on your tummy? Could you do that with a Brazilian butt lift?
Absolutely, and that's very common. Typically, we're doing some form of liposuction on both the abdomen and the back because, creating that waistline, it also helps to accentuate the gluteal region. So, like I said, it's a kind of combination procedure. If you just inject this fat without contouring the waistline, it's going to look odd and then not look symmetrical. The whole thing is about creating that symmetrical shape so that you get that big bang.
Okay, and pictures number 2, and Fred, if you could put picture number 3 on, because that's what I was kind of looking at, is this patient looks like she had Vaser body sculpting and a Brazilian butt lift because her stomach is really flat. Is that what this patient had?
Absolutely. And, I use the Vaser when I do my liposuction for several reasons. And, what it's using is it's using the assistance of ultrasonic energy to help break up fat cells. But it doesn't injure the surrounding fat, and that's been, studied by multiple publications in many medical centers. And, so the fat is still viable after applying the energy to the Vaser, plus it doesn't damage any of the surrounding tissue. So, there are some studies coming out that shows that sometimes even the Vaser fat is more viable because what happens is by breaking the fat into smaller pieces, it's got more of a chance of the blood supply and oxygenation getting to it so that it can survive, in higher quantities.
And how long is the downtime if a patient were to come in and get like 2 areas of body sculpting for their tummy and then also a Brazilian butt lift? What is the downtime a typical patient could experience?
Most people are going back to work somewhere between 7 and 10 days. And it all depends on what you do. Like I said, typically no sitting for 10 days. So if you're not on a job that's standing and have someone that can drive, it's very difficult to go back to work. But, these precautions are necessary because, we're going through an operation and we want to make sure that we get the best results. we want to get the highest viability of fat, and these are just some of the things that we need to do. Also that, you're not able to exercise for 6 weeks. Excuse me. You're not able to exercise for 6 weeks because I don't want you putting any undue stress on contracting the muscle and, clamping down on the fat that we just, transplanted in there.
Yeah, that sounds logical, but can a patient during that short recovery time sit down for short spells like in a car or no?
Typically not. I mean, I typically allow them to sit to use the restroom, but that's about it for the first 10 days.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent. Question came in a little while ago is what would the cost be for 2 areas of Vaser body sculpting and a Brazilian butt lift? And I'll answer that question. We're actually having a special for the rest of the month of July. 2 areas of Vaser body sculpting and a Brazilian butt lift for $7,499. But that does require a physical one-on-one consultation with Dr. LaGrasso because not everyone makes a perfect candidate for this procedure. So if you call our office at 954-450-2626, we can schedule a consult with Dr. LaGrasso in the upcoming week. Anything else you'd like to add, Dr. LaGrasso?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think we covered the whole procedure, Brian.
Well, thank you very much for joining us again. Look forward to having you on hopefully next week, and we'll discuss another procedure at that time.
I'll see you then. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks, Dr. LaGrasso. Okay, I think we actually went past our break today, and that's okay because Dr. LaGrasso is in between patients, and it was very important to get him on during the time we had. Let's get back to the study. And Freddie, if you could bring up this slide, which is called Know Your ABCDEs. And what we're going to talk about, I went to the dermatologist this week, and I know better. And they found some spots on me that looked suspicious and burned them off. And I wear sunscreen, and, as a study from last week showed, even minor sunburns in your teenage years can cause skin cancers. And we're going to go through the ABCDEs of moles and different growths on your skin. And again, if you look at the screen, you can see on the left-hand side of the pictures you have abnormal moles. On the right-hand side is how they should look. And the ABCDEs also have a meaning. So A stands for asymmetry. If one half of the mole looks different from the other, that's a sign that the mole could be cancerous. B stands for border irregularity. Irregular, poorly defined, or blurred borders can be a sign of melanoma. And you can see that the second picture down, that mole is very irregular. It's not a round shape. It's kind of like an egg with growths on it. C stands for color. Particularly dark or multicolored moles can be risky. D stands for diameter. Moles larger than a pencil eraser are noteworthy, although melanomas can be smaller too. Typically you want the mole to be no bigger than the end of an eraser in a pencil, and that's typically the size most moles will grow to. Anything larger than that you should kind of have looked at. And looking at these pictures, what you notice is, and you can't get the details, but they're all very small in appearance, generally speaking. But the cancer and the disfiguring part of these surgeries is underneath is where the growth could occur. So even like on picture 4, that little tiny mole that's normal in appearance, if that was cancerous, that could extend inches up to the left, up to the right, 5-6 inches down to the right or left. And you could have a disfiguring injury if you put that in your face and you had to cut off 4 inches of your skin, left, right, up, and down. You would have truly a disfiguring scar. And that can and does happen. So just because it's a tiny bit of cancer on the top of the skin does not mean that it does not extend much further down, deeper and along the sides of the lesion. Okay, E is for evolution or change. A mole that's changing in size, shape, or color is definitely one that needs to be checked out. So on our website again at www.foreveryoungmedspa.us, if you click on blogs, These articles are either now on the website or will be very shortly. And we put this up, for kind of public education because skin cancer, as we talked about last week, is rampant in South Florida and all the sun belts. And if you recall that picture of that trucker who aged dramatically on his left side facing the sun, it's not just about aging, it's about your health. It's about keeping yourself alive. And skin cancers, unfortunately, are just a reality in the sun belt. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more on sunscreens. Because one of the ways to protect against skin cancer is making sure you wear sunscreens. And one of the patients asked me recently, what do the different initials mean on a sunscreen? So I thought I'd cover that today. So what the initials mean. SPF means sun protection factor. So typically no one in South Florida should be out in the sun without an SPF of 30. And when you have an SPF of 30, it blocks out 29/30ths of the sun rays, or 97%. So between 30 and 45, you don't gain much. You go from 97% to about 99%. And on average, the average person needs to use about 2 tablespoons of sunscreen on the body to achieve the product's SPF. UPF is ultraviolet protection factor, and that's a rating used in some sun protective clothing. So UPF is for the clothing lines that give you some sun protection. UVB. UVB rays are the strongest between typically 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., although during daylight savings time that may change an hour. And these are the type of rays, UVB, that are generally the cause of sunburns. So when you have a sunburn, the cause of that sunburn are UVB rays. UVA rays are ultraviolet rays, and those penetrate much more deeply into the skin, and these cause the most serious sun damage, often without a visible burn. Tanning beds emit primarily UVA radiation, which is up to 12 times more than the sun. I want to repeat that because anyone going to a tanning booth is literally playing Russian roulette with cancer. Tanning beds emit UVA radiation up to 12 times more than the actual sun. And they're insidious type of rays because you don't know you're getting burned. They just penetrate deep into your skin and cause really horrible devastation to your skin. UVAs also penetrate untreated cars and other windows as well. One of the overlooked things in sun protection is the fact that your eyes need protection as well. UV rays are harmful to the eyes and can lead to cataracts and macular degeneration later in life, says Dr. William Deek, an ophthalmologist in Mount Kisco. So always be sure that when you're picking a sunglass or sunglasses, always choose sunglasses that block both UVA and UVB rays. Also, kind of a misnomer is, you only wear sunscreen in the summer months. That's the furthest thing from the truth, no matter what climate you're in, but especially in South Florida. We are a year-round sun belt state. So sun protection of an SPF 30 to 45 should be the first thing you put on every single morning if you're a guy, if you're a girl, and especially if you're a child or you're under 18. You want to protect your skin as much as possible. Research has shown, just like last week's study, that just one bad burn can significantly increase your chance of melanoma. Just one bad burn. And I shudder to think of all the bad burns I've had in my life being an avid boater, fisherman, and diver, especially when I was growing up. It was thought that the sun was very healthy, which, vitamin D comes from the sun, and it is healthy for you in 15-minute increments, but everybody needs to be wearing an SPF 30 to 45. If you have children especially, the first thing you do, just like putting on a shirt to go outside, is putting on sunscreen. Even if you stay out of the sun between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., and you're just kind of casually walking around in the shade, you're still exposed to the radiation from UVA rays. And the danger is year-round. It doesn't matter if even right now it's raining outside, right? It's South Florida under another summer deluge, and it's very cloudy. UVA rays are still penetrating, and they're wreaking havoc with your skin. So don't think because it's cloudy outside that you're protected from the sun, because you're not. Again, UVB burns. UVB burns you. It causes the sunburns. UVA does much more damage to your skin, but it doesn't let you know it. It does the damage insidiously. So, again, very, very important to always, 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 always wear sunscreen. So we're going to go to our break, and when we come back, we're going to have a special guest. My wife, Dinah Santamaria, is going to join us to talk about cosmetic surgery and aesthetic procedure nightmares that have happened in South Florida. Check us out at www.foreveryoungmedspa.us. This is Brian Sedella, your host, and we'll be back in a few seconds.
Turn back the hands of time with South Florida's #1 medical aesthetics center, Forever Young Med Spa. Have you ever wished you could turn back the hands of time? Lose those lines and wrinkles and enjoy the healthy, flawless skin you had during your younger years? Ever wanted to rid yourself from hair under your arms, on your legs, or around your bikini area? Or men, the hair on your backs? Well, now you can at Forever Young Med Spa, where we provide the latest surgical and non-surgical procedures and rejuvenation products to restore your youthful skin appearance and enhance your self-image. Under the direction of renowned board-certified plastic surgeon Dr. Jeffrey Lagrasso, our staff of highly trained and certified professionals will meet with you to go over your goals and recommend services that best fit your lifestyle, your budget, and your expectations. So no matter if you're looking for surgical procedures such as Vaser high-definition body sculpting, a mommy makeover, or non-surgical services such as the latest FDA-approved injectables, Vanquish body contouring, Exilis Elite for skin tightening, or our Hydrafacial MD treatment for your face, you can relax and let Forever Young Med Spa complete your journey towards a younger, more vibrant-looking you. Call us now and schedule a complimentary consultation at 954-450-2626. That's 954-450-2626. Or for more information on all our services, please visit our website, www.foreveryoungmedspa.us.
Welcome back, South Florida. And about to join me in about 35 seconds is my beautiful wife, Diana Santamaria, who's also one of the most preeminent medical malpractice and personal injury attorneys in the country. And I'm very happy she's joining me because a couple of her cases in recent memory have featured some truly horrific injuries caused by improper procedures or doctors who aren't properly licensed to do procedures that they're doing. And I want to warn you, if you're watching on TV and you have kids, or if you're kind of a weak stomach, you might want to turn the video portion off, because we're going to show some very graphic pictures of actual patients that have had cosmetic surgery or procedure nightmares. So welcome, Dinah. Are you on the phone?
I am. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, my beautiful wife. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Brian.
It's been a very wet afternoon. It took me a long time to get here today. So what I'd like to do is talk about patient number one. Hopefully you have the paperwork there in front of you. This is that 40-year-old mom that sought out anti-aging treatments, and her goal was to look great at her daughter's wedding. And on screen, for a viewing audience, you can see her before picture. We've kind of put a little black bar over her eyes so you can't make out who the person is if you know them. But this is how she looked before the treatments. And I'd ask you, Freddie, to bring up the second picture. And Dinah, this is the second picture showing this patient in the hospital. Kind of describe to me what happened during this procedure.
Sure. Well, this particular client went to a spa in Miami looking for. She wasn't sure what specifically she wanted. She just wanted to look a little better, a more youthful appearance, as you mentioned, in preparation for her daughter's wedding. And what ended up happening to her is she was advised that some injections in her face would really help out her general appearance, and she was injected with what she was told to be vitamins. And what happened was, within a couple of weeks, unbeknownst to her, and later it was learned through the hospitalization, she went through about 75 days in the hospital. She actually had two things going on. One, her body reacted very horrifically to the substance that was injected, and also involving very severe inflammation and infection.
Yeah, we're showing.
As a result of that, after about 17 surgical procedures where the substance was attempted to be extracted, and not all of it ever was, she now has permanent scarring on her face that appears as if what occurred happened, and that is they had to take a knife to her face to actually try and extract this substance.
Oh my God. The pictures, if you're watching at home, are truly horrific, and this woman looks like she's in agony. Now, you mentioned vitamins. Did they ever determine what the substance was? Because vitamins typically wouldn't cause this type of allergic reaction.
Well, one wouldn't think that vitamins would do that. And to answer your question, no, it was never determined. And despite extensive medical pathology, that was the substances that were taken out were sent out not only by the hospital itself in their pathology department, but also by other specialists wanting to know. And whatever it was, there was an infectious component, which was the actual bacterium. It wouldn't be relevant for our listening audience, but it was essentially something that you would find in dirty, unsterilized water. But the actual substance itself, what it was nothing that could be identified as being anything of a medical nature, at least not in this country.
Wow. Now, you mentioned it was done at a spa. Was it a medical spa or a medical establishment? What kind of spa was this?
This was a spa that it was called a spa, and what they would typically do there would be massages and facials, but not medical facials, just the type of facials that you would go and, traditionally, where somebody would do extractions and things of that nature. This particular client went there because someone had recommended the place, and all she really wanted was just a more youthful appearance, believing that the person who was doing the procedure that ultimately turned out to be injections was fully qualified to do what she was saying that she would do.
And what were the qualifications of the person who actually injected her?
As it turns out, the person was a massage therapist by training, but even unlicensed at that as a massage therapist. So essentially no medical training. Certainly she wasn't trained or medically qualified in the state of Florida to administer any injections.
And for our listening audience, if you didn't know, the only people that are licensed to inject in the state of Florida are doctors, obviously, nurse practitioners, or physician assistants. No other title can legally inject in the state of Florida. And unfortunately, even in my office, we see this all too commonly of, hey, I went to a friend of mine's house, we had a little party on the patio, and we injected each other, and they come in with disfigurements. The most common item we see being injected is silicone, which is a horrible substance because you can't remove it unless you do surgery. So, wow. And in the last picture, I don't know if you're online or not, Dinah, is the actual picture of the patient now. And although she's better from her 70-plus days of hospitalization, she is left, obviously, with permanent disfigurement.
Yeah, it's very sad. She's permanently disfigured.
Wow. Well, our heart goes out to her because it's obvious she's gone through just a horrible time. I can't imagine the pain she must have been with those type of surgeries she had. And if this wasn't bad enough, patient number 2 even gets my stomach a little queasy. So patient number 2, what can you tell us about her? On the slide it says divorced mother of 2, 40-plus year old patient. And the first set of slides, I guess, is apparently the pictures that the doctor or the center took prior to the surgery actually happening, because I can see some markings on her body.
Yes, those photos, and to answer your first question, these are photos of a 40-plus divorced mother of two, who you can see from her preoperative photos had a beautiful body, and she went to a medical spa in Broward County, and she was just looking for a little lipo of the abdomen area. After discussing her goals and what she was looking for with the physician, a non-plastic surgeon physician, but a physician, he recommended that why wouldn't she allow him to just take some of the fat that he would be removing from her abdomen and implant it into her buttocks to give her buttocks a more rounded appearance. It wasn't what she went in there for. All she wanted was a little lipo of the abdomen area, but he convinced her that he would be able to use that fat and give her a more attractive appearance in her buttocks. But from looking at these photographs, I think most anybody would agree that she probably didn't need anything. But yes, that, and I don't know if I answered all your questions.
Well, let me ask you, these questions, or these pictures bring up a lot of questions to me. You mentioned that the center, I guess, is a doctor's office where the surgery was performed. Was it a certified, state-inspected surgical center?
Well, that's a very good question. At the time, whether you're a certified surgical center has a lot to do with what you register yourself as doing. If you do general anesthesia, there's a certain certification that is required, which this center did not have. But what they registered themselves as doing is non-general anesthesia, just sedation. And for the sedation that they were representing that they would use on their patients, they did qualify to be a surgical center.
But a surgical center that does kind of like minor procedures as adverse to the type of surgery this person actually had. And I'm going to digress a little bit because Dr. LaGrasso and I had a conversation recently about, a lot of centers offer liposuction under what's called a local, which means you're going to tumescence the area with lidocaine, and all goes well in that type of procedure until or unless you break the plane of the fat, and that lidocaine can enter the bloodstream and cause a reaction, possibly fatal reaction of a heart attack or other complications, which is why Dr. LaGrasso does not do any of these procedures under a local. All these procedures are under a general, and there's no such thing in life as a Band-Aid surgery. All surgery carries some risk, and make sure at a minimum that your doctor is a board-certified plastic surgeon. Now, was this doctor a plastic surgeon, a board-certified plastic surgeon? What kind of doctor was he or she?
He was a board-certified internal medicine doctor. He was not a board-certified plastic surgeon. He had taken some courses in liposuction. He had taken some seminars. And he had been a surgeon in another country to the extent of emergency surgeries, of stitching up cuts and things of that nature. But again, not a board-certified plastic surgeon.
And this is one of the problems still in Florida and in many states, is that if you have an MD title, you can decide to watch a DVD tape and then undertake a procedure that you never were trained for in medical school. And again, for our listening audience, a board-certified plastic surgeon, and all doctors start with an MD designation, and then a board-certified plastic surgeon has 6 to 7 more years of conventional surgery, emergency surgery, specialization in plastic surgery, and then a residency program. So always insist upon a board-certified plastic surgeon. And to check to see if your doctor is a board-certified surgeon, go to www.abplsurge.org. I'm putting this link on our website as well. That's www.abplsurge.org. And Dinah, we're showing some more pictures here. Freddie, could you bring up the next set of pictures? It looks like this woman's skin is actually just falling right off her body.
Well, and as you see these pictures, and our listening audience can, she was very, very fortunate, because what happened to her is she developed something called necrotizing fasciitis. It's also known as a flesh-eating bacteria, and it consumed her abdomen and it consumed her buttocks. She fell into a coma and was in a coma for close to a month. During that period of time, the surgeons at the hospital did a phenomenal job of cutting out all the bacterium, both in her abdomen and in her buttocks, to the point where by the time she came out of there, she really had no fatty tissue in the buttocks, and she's been dealing with essentially not having a butt. And we all underestimate our butts, but they're there to provide padding in when we sit down so that we can sit comfortably. What happened to her after all this, and as I said, she was very, very lucky, because she survived this. We have, just on CNN just a few days ago, there was a woman who developed necrotizing fasciitis, and she had to have her upper limbs and her lower limbs surgically amputated, basically. So this patient was very lucky. But the photos you're looking at are of after the 30-day hospitalization, showing the actual tissue without the muscle, with everything depleted from it.
Boy, these pictures get me angry. This kind of stuff should never happen. And you mentioned the flesh-eating bacteria. I think a year ago, there was a story, I think also in Atlanta, of a father-son who went swimming and contracted flesh-eating bacteria from the lake, and they actually died. So this was a life-threatening type of illness she contracted, right?
Oh, yes. Her parents were advised that she had about a 50-50 chance of surviving. About two days into her hospitalization, they weren't sure whether she would survive.
Wow. Okay, and Freddie's brought up the last set of pictures. If you can go back to the prior one first, Freddie. Again, and what Dinah was talking about was looking at this patient's, I guess, her left buttocks area. You can see, and again, I apologize for the graphic nature of the photos, but it's important to see this. This is what can happen in the wrong hands at the wrong kind of center. In addition to your doctor being a board-certified plastic center, make sure the surgical center is state-certified and inspected and can perform these type of procedures. These are not back-office doctor procedures to be performed, in a cavalier nature. These are very, could be life-threatening. There's no such thing as a Band-Aid surgery, guys. So this picture shows the tremendous amount of fat loss this patient underwent. And then finally, the last set of pictures looks like they're her present condition photos, and
yes,
boy, those.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. These look pretty bad.
Well, yes, but it's actually it's actually it's a very healthy situation, because there's skin grafting that covered up essentially the holes in her abdomen and in her buttocks. Her body took those skin grafts. What is, of course, the disfigurement is the loss of tissue and muscle that had to be cut out with the bacterium that occurred, the tissue and basically the flesh that had been removed. So what you have for people who are not able to see this, the last set of photos show on both buttocks severely indented cheeks, that show very black patchy skin it's obviously indented because she permanently lost fat, muscle, and flesh in order to save her life and get the infection out of her body.
Now, these are two examples, the patient number one, now patient number two. Is this something common you see in your office, or is this kind of an isolated incident of these two patients?
Well, what I see in my office, I do get a lot of calls on cosmetic surgery cases. Many people are just simply not satisfied. This, in my practice, seeing this, I don't see this with the frequency, thankfully, that, of these two particular ones. That's not to say that these things don't happen with a alarmingly higher frequency than the general public is aware. Another example of situations I've seen in my office is operating room fires. Now, people would probably think that's a very rare thing. It's more common than one would think. So I can't go by my practice as being representative of what happens out there. These are two very severe, isolated cases of what can happen, but unfortunately, the reality is that there is a higher rate of frequency of these cases happening out there than the general public probably knows. And it's fortunate when they have this type of outcome versus dying, because, of course, we all hear about those, the patients that just don't make it, and they die as a result of some complication in the operating room.
And for our audience, if you want to get a hold of Diana Santamaria, her law firm number is 954-434-1077. That's 954-434-1077. Diana's office is in Davie, Florida. And you mentioned that you've had cases with an operating room fire. How does that happen?
Well, in the case, in cases that I've had, it's usually something as simple as the surgeon using an electrocautery device, they call them a BOVI, to cauterize an area of surgery, and it going into the operative field that's oxygenated because the anesthesiologist is giving the patient oxygen, and of course everyone knows from high school chemistry you don't mix fire with oxygen because you're going to have an explosion. It's as simple as something like that. And unfortunately, when I got my first of those cases, I started doing studies and looking into statistics, and it was an alarming rate of operating room fires occur, even in hospital settings. So it's scary.
Well, so you have, I'm imagining in this operating room, you have the anesthesiologist at the head of the patient, and then you have the surgeon, and depending on what type of operation they're doing, they could be in various parts of the body. Whose job is it in the OR to say, hey, are we clear of an oxygen field so we don't light the patient on fire? Whose job is that?
Yeah, well, usually you like to believe that the surgeon is the captain of the ship, so to speak. The surgeon is the one who's carrying out the procedure, the operative procedure, and should be the captain of the ship. The anesthesiologist is always at the patient's head and is the one administering the anesthesia. Ideally, both should be communicating and watching what the other is doing. In the case such as the one I had in my office, the surgery was occurring close to the patient's head. It was really just a cyst that was being removed in an outpatient procedure, but the patient was out. And the surgery was essentially over. The surgeon was going to cauterize the wound. The anesthesiologist had the oxygen cannula near the patient's nose, and an explosion really broke out. And because the sheets and the linens were not fireproof or fire retardant, there was a very large explosion around this patient's head, which caused severe burns and disfigurement on his face.
Oh, my God. Well, getting back to patient 2, the one with the necrotizing fasciitis, what happened? I mean, was a doctor ever brought up on charges, or, I mean, how did that all go down?
Well, we brought the civil case. Our office handles civil cases, and we brought the civil case both as a premises case and a medical malpractice case. We also notified the Department of Health because regardless of whether or not we were going to be able to help the client receive compensation, it's important to our firm to make sure that doctors that unfortunately create results like these get reviewed to determine whether or not there was something that it should be looked into by the profession. In other words, doctors that need to be regulated by the profession. And this doctor has been regulated. In fact, I do not believe everything is over for this particular doctor. The Department of Health has has imposed sanction, has done a very thorough investigation, and that matter is still proceeding.
Wow. Well, it's nice to know that you're also taking a look not just at taking care of your prospective client in recovering damages, but also in trying to get the perpetrator, whether it's a doctor, a person, a road hazard, or whatever have you, also corrected. And again, for the listening audience, if you'd like to get a hold of Diana Santamaria's law firm, which specializes in personal injury, medical malpractice, and premise liability cases, along with nursing home neglect, her number is 954-434-1077. That's 954-434-1077. Well, I'd like to thank you, Diana, for joining us and going over these two patients. I think the listening audience and our viewing audience who will be able to see these tapes online are going to really be shocked if you haven't seen it so far. I'm amazed that these type of injuries can happen and do occur in South Florida.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience, and I'll see you later.
Thank you, Diana. Have a great afternoon, sweetheart.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, welcome back. And again, I want to thank our two guests today, my wife, Diana Santamaria, and Dr. Jeffrey LoGrasso for joining us. And we had quite a few other things to get to today, but I think we'll have to leave that for another show. Freddie, if you could bring up this picture of this lady. This is probably a very famous photograph for most of us in South Florida because it made national news. And it was of the woman who had her buttocks injected with, if I remember correctly, some type of cement. And it looks that way. I mean, you talk about a disfigured appearance. This woman's appearance is, yikes, very scary. And at Forever Young Med Spa, by the way, we see a lot of this. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from patients that, I had a friend of a friend of a friend inject me on their patio. They had a Botox party or a filler party or some type of, let's get together and make ourselves beautiful party. Going back to our first show, that's why I hate the term cosmetics. Cosmetics can be found in every department store, at Sephora, even drugstores. And cosmetic surgery makes it sound like it's easy and anyone can do it. And that is simply not the case, ladies and gentlemen. Have to go to a professional. Make sure you're going to see at a medical spa. The medical doctor has to be a board-certified plastic surgeon or dermatologist. And again, the only folks that can legally inject you, are nurse practitioners or physician assistants or doctors themselves. Actually, dentists can also inject, but that's a topic for a different show. So, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon on the Forever Young Med Spa Simple Aesthetic Show. We're going to have a great show next week. We're trying to line up Victoria Duke, and that'll be a very special event because Victoria is the makeup artist for the stars. Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, Hilary Duff, Hilary Swank, Pussycat Dolls, the Panther Cheerleaders, and she's also a motivational speaker and runs her own center teaching folks how to do makeup in South Florida. So she'll be joining us next week. And it looks like I have a few more minutes to go through one more study. We'll try and get to it. This one is on excessive sweating. And what are the options to eliminate or correct or reduce excessive sweating? Well, the number one part is, as everyone knows, antiperspirants, but they only go so far. Number two, and very popular in our practice, is the use of Botox or Dysport or Xeomin. And how that works is it simply mobilizes the nerves. Botox blocks the connection and decreases sweating. In our practice, we're seeing most patients go 9 to 12 months without needing to be retouched on the Botox and Dysport or Xeomin. So for us, it's been a very, very good service that our patients really love who have this condition. And it can be used in the hands, feet, or armpits. There's a new technology that's kind of interesting we've been looking at but haven't pulled the trigger on yet. It's called Miradry, and this is an RF radio frequency device, same kind of energy your microwave uses. and it actually destroys the sweat gland, which is, I guess, going to be a permanent reduction of excessive sweating. And reading through this study, in clinical trials, it shows over a 50% reduction in the severity of hyperhidrosis, which is a clinical term for excessive sweating, after one treatment, and over a 60% decrease in odor. A second treatment decreases the severity by up to 95%. Again, we're looking at this, but one of the things I've learned in the 10 years in this business is kind of don't adopt something quickly, too soon, because we simply don't know, medically speaking, what the long-term prognosis is going to be for destroying instead of reducing the effectiveness of the sweat glands, actually destroying them, and what that could mean down the road. And if you don't know, 1 in 5 Americans experiences excessive sweating in their lifetime. And it's not just a case of sweating because it's hot outside. Some of these patients sweat just because they sweat all day long, no matter if it's hot or cold. And it's an annoyance, yes, but it's also, it can ruin your clothes and obviously lead to some some awkward social interactions. And again, heat doesn't trigger it, stress doesn't trigger it, just very overactive sweat glands trigger this condition. The study goes on to talk about, besides deodorant being, I guess, the most commonly used protectant for excessive sweating, it goes on to say, and more research is being done into this as well, that some of the ingredients in some of the deodorant is considered to be toxic. So I know my wife actually shops at Whole Foods and gets her kind of a natural deodorant, but some of the studies, especially in Europe, are showing that deodorants can really be caustic to your health. So that's it. We have a couple more studies to get to. We'll get to those next week. I want to thank everyone for joining us on the Forever Young Med Spa Simple Aesthetics radio show. And if you need to contact us, our phone number is 954-450-2626. And you can always look us up on the web at www.foreveryoungmedspa.us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining Brian Sedella, President and founder of South Florida's #1 medical aesthetics center, Forever Young Med Spa in Cooper City. Join us next week as Brian will again demystify the world of medical aesthetics and provide you, our listening audience, a non-medical opinion on what's hot, what's not, and what really works. You can contact Forever Young Med Spa at 954-450-2626 or visit our website at foreveryoungmedspa.us. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.